Top performers aren't busier than you, they're just clearer. They know exactly what's worth doing and everything that isn't. If you're constantly busy, constantly stressed, and still not making real progress, while others around you are pulling ahead, this will explain exactly why and how to fix it. Now, I'm Rian Doris, founder and CEO of FlowState.com. We've trained everyone from Audi, Accenture, and the US Air Force to use neuroscience-based principles to access flow states at will. Now, back in Barcelona, I had a roommate, let's call him Alan, who ran his own business. Alan had one clear and urgent goal, which was to earn $250,000 a year to cover his expenses, pay rent, and regain financial stability. He was intelligent, he was disciplined, and he was obsessed with productivity. Every morning, Alan would do elaborate routines specifically designed to get him into flow state and increase his focus. He'd take his carefully researched nootropic supplement stack, he'd optimize his workspace for deep focus, blocking out all distractions, and it worked. Alan would spend hours every day in flow, fully concentrated, absorbed in his work. But in our apartment in Barcelona, I would watch him work, and it became increasingly mind-boggling to me. It was like Alan's mind didn't have the ability to link what he was working on in the moment to the outcome that he was trying to achieve. He would spend hours deep in flow, really pushing himself, staying laser focused on things that were never going to get him the result that he was after. And as his finances continued to drain, this issue didn't improve. The more urgent the situation became, the more Alan continued to do the same, working on things that had no causal relationship to the goal that he didn't just want to achieve, but needed to achieve to be able to run his life at a basic level. For example, Alan had several potential prospects he could have warmed up into clients who would sign contracts, but instead of following up with them, he'd spend entire days in flow state, redesigning his website or creating content to build a personal brand for some potential future use. He had a clear opportunity to generate immediate income by closing those sales, but he kept pouring his focus into things that wouldn't bring in a single dollar in the short term. Things that were completely unrelated to the goal. And I watched in awe as he mastered the art of getting into flow states, but completely missed the point of where to direct that powerful mental state. Alan's problem wasn't procrastination, it wasn't distraction, and it certainly wasn't laziness. It was something far more insidious, precisely because it felt like progress. Alan was experiencing misallocated flow state. Misallocated flow state is the experience of being deeply focused, fully immersed in the zone, actually in flow, but in flow aimed at tasks that have no direct link to your goals. It's the invisible productivity trap where you feel your best, perform at your best, yet move nowhere meaningful because you're getting into flow on the wrong things. This is the danger of misallocated flow. Flow becomes fuel for going fast in the wrong direction. It's like having a Ferrari, but driving it in circles instead of toward your destination. The reason misallocated flow occurs is usually due to a lack of a specific skill, and it's the single skill that determines whether you'll achieve your goals or not. And it has nothing to do with productivity hacks, time blocking, or even how focused you are. The reason my roommate Alan kept misallocating his flow was that he was extremely low on what we call the goal-directed spectrum. The goal-directed spectrum measures how precisely your moment-to-moment actions align with your long-term goals. The lower you are on the goal-directed spectrum, the more likely you are to be like Alan, to fall victim to feeling productive but making no real progress because what you're working on is just irrelevant to what needs to occur to move toward the goals you have. In the middle of the spectrum, you have goals but frequently get pulled off course. If you're high on the spectrum, almost everything you do gets you closer to what you really want. Your actions are determined almost exclusively by your goals, regardless of what's happening around you. My old roommate, Alan, was low on the goal-directed spectrum, working hard, even getting into flow, as I mentioned, but making zero progress toward his actual goal of becoming financially stable again and earning the $250,000 a year he needed to earn. On the other end, you have the peak performers. They're high on the goal-directed spectrum. They move less, they do fewer tasks, but they hit every target with precision. You can think of this as minute-decade alignment. The higher you are on the goal-directed spectrum, the more your days serve your decades. Your moment-by-moment actions link to your long-term goals in the most effective, direct, and precise possible way. It's the difference between being a leaf in the wind and a heat-seeking missile. A leaf in the wind is constantly fluttering around, moving all over the place, busy but directionless. The heat-seeking missile moves far less in total distance traveled, but actually, bam, hits the target, moving in the straightest possible line. Now here's the crucial distinction. What matters is not how intensely the missile flies. What matters is whether it hits the target it's locked onto in the first place. People obsess over how focused they are and how long they can maintain that focus, but they grossly underemphasize what they're focusing on. Goal-directedness isn't about the intensity of your focus, it's about the target of your focus. Now some people hear goal-directed and they think it's just about having goals and kind of working towards them in general. They believe they're already goal-directed because they've written down some long-term goals, but true goal-directedness isn't about having goals, it's about having your goals drive your daily actions. And goal-directedness definitely isn't about becoming a robot who only does productive things and whose whole life is oriented around their goals. That's not the point or the concept here. In fact, highly goal-directed people often have dramatically more free time for spontaneity precisely because they don't waste energy and time on non-goal-directed actions that don't move them toward the destination they're in pursuit of. To see the different extremes of the goal-directed spectrum, consider this scenario. Let's say two founders both aim to grow their businesses to 7 figures by year's end. The first founder desperately wants that goal, but is low on the goal-directed spectrum. Instead of evaluating which actions directly lead to that outcome, they rewrite team structures, draft manifestos, and attend networking events that feel productive but don't move the number. The direct path, perhaps simply increasing lead volume by scaling up outreach, is right in front of them, but they can't see it. The goal-directed founder is different. Same goal, same urgency, but every decision runs through a critical filter. What moves me closer to that number faster than anything else that I could possibly do? They find the shortest path that drives the outcome, linked by cause and effect, and then they walk that path. Whether that's rewriting the offer, calling warm leads, or shipping the one feature that boosts retention. Amateurs let the circumstance run their day. Goal-directed peak performers let their goals run their day. And they do this relentlessly, hour by hour, meeting by meeting. They constantly recalibrate and reorient their attention toward their goals. Every morning, every hour, every decision point becomes another opportunity to tighten their alignment. They don't just set their direction once. They function like the heat-seeking missile that we mentioned and course correct continuously, making micro adjustments that keep them locked on target regardless of what the day throws at them. Now, it turns out where you fall on the goal-directed spectrum is underpinned by neuroscience. Researchers Bernard Balin and John O'Doherty from the University of New South Wales and the California Institute of Technology have demonstrated that our brains have 2 different systems for controlling our actions. One system runs on stimulus response. It's fast, automatic, and built for energy conservation. The other operates on action outcome. It calculates the relationship between what you do and what results you get. In simple terms, one neural system thinks before it acts. The other acts without thinking. Most people default to the stimulus response system. See a notification, check it. Hear a ping, react to it. Get bored, switch tasks. This is what makes you behave like the leaf in the wind, reacting to whatever comes along with no internal direction, no inner compass. Peak performers, however, they operate primarily from the goal-directed action outcome system. Constantly evaluating, if I do X, I will achieve Y. This is what powers your internal heat-seeking missile, keeping you moving directly towards your target. Researchers Balin and O'Doherty, they describe the defining feature of goal-directedness as one's sensitivity to the relation between the action and the outcome. That's the essence of goal-directedness. It's the sensitivity you have to the degree to which your current actions will lead to, drive, and materialize the future outcomes you're pursuing. This action outcome goal-directed mode of cognition relies on a network of brain regions working in concert, specifically to maintain your focus on outcomes in the future, not just activity in the present. The prefrontal cortex functions as your strategic planner, keeping your goal in working memory while you evaluate different paths to reach it. The hippocampus connects past experiences with future scenarios, helping you envision the most direct route to your goal. The basal ganglia helps you select specific actions based on their predicted outcomes rather than just habitual responses. When these regions work together, you naturally filter out distractions that don't contribute to your outcome, giving you the laser-like focus of the heat-seeking missile. The more time you spend operating from the goal-directed system, the more your brain wires itself to act this way by default over time. You become someone who instinctively filters every task by whether it gets you closer to your goal or not. And that's what moves you up the goal-directed spectrum, away from where Alan was, towards where the peak performers are. The goal-directed spectrum measures how often and precisely your brain operates in action outcome mode, evaluating actions in real time and adjusting behavior to maximize goal attainment. At the low end, your actions are reactive, habitual, and misaligned. At the high end, they're intentional, sequenced, and causally linked to your desired outcome. To get a sense of where you fall on the goal-directed spectrum, let's consider what high goal-directedness looks like in a typical workday. Imagine this, it's noon, you just finished lunch, but only half of your primary goal-directed action for the day is complete. Notifications are flooding in, emails are demanding replies, and minor fires pop up everywhere. Being highly goal-directed means you pause, deliberately ignore the urgent distractions, and go straight back into finishing your highest priority goal-directed action. Now it's the end of your scheduled workday and you realize there's still one crucial goal-directed action unfinished because you got thrown off earlier. Being highly goal-directed means spending the next 40 minutes knocking that one goal-directed action out to be able to declare your day a victory. Now let me emphasize something important. Goal-directedness is probably the single biggest lever on your output. Once you understand this, something remarkable becomes possible. When you operate at the high end of the goal-directed spectrum, you can accomplish in focused strategic hours what others take entire weeks to do. This means you can either achieve far more in the same time or maintain your current output while dramatically improving your work-life balance and working way less. And this is how you can also maximize the flow state you experience. Goal-directedness ensures you're working on the right things, while flow ensures you're working on those right things with maximum effectiveness. They're two sides of the same peak performance coin. The number one way to work less while achieving the same or more isn't just to get good at driving yourself into flow states, it's to apply those flow states to the right activities through increasing levels of goal-directedness. Now remember, flow by itself doesn't guarantee progress. You can experience flow doing completely unproductive things. You can be in the zone playing video games or endlessly perfecting your company logo when neither will move the needle on your actual goals. However, as you move up the goal-directed spectrum, you don't just enter flow, you direct it. Flow without goal-directedness is just speed. What we want is velocity, which is speed plus direction. Goal-directedness gives your flow state's a vector. It ensures that your highest performing mental state is actually productive because it's aligned to your long-term goals. Flow is the fuel for the missile. Goal-directedness is the targeting system. And flow can reinforce goal-directedness. The rewarding nature of flow associated with increased happiness and intrinsic motivation encourages individuals to set and pursue goals that lead to such states. This creates a positive feedback loop where being goal-directed increases the likelihood of entering flow. And flow, in turn, enhances the motivation needed to pursue goals. You might wonder, isn't goal-directedness just a fancy way of saying prioritization? Not quite. Prioritization is just one of 4 sub-skills that make up the overall meta-skill of goal-directedness. The 4 sub-skills are, number 1, goal clarity, the ability to set a clear long-term goal. That's the first part of goal-directedness. Second, action identification, the ability to identify which actions will directly move you toward your long-term goal. Third, it's prioritization, putting goal-directed actions first, always. And fourth, strategic neglect, the discipline to completely ignore everything other than the goal-directed actions. The first sub-skill is the ability to set a clear long-term goal. This sub-skill is about defining exactly what you're trying to achieve over the next year, 3 years or 5 years. If you want to be a heat-seeking missile, the missile needs something to seek. Whether it's building a business to a specific revenue level, mastering a discipline, or completing a concrete project, this is the top of the stack. Without this, every task looks equal, every distraction becomes justifiable. There is no filter. The fewer goals you pursue at once, the more goal-directed you are, because it takes time to be sufficiently goal-directed for any given goal. You've got to identify the actions and constantly ask yourself, what are the actions? For any given goal, they're going to maximally move me towards it. So if you've got multiple goals, you've got to do that multiple times, which usually deteriorates your ability to do that and thus makes you less goal-directed across all the goals. So to maximize goal-directedness, generally you want to intensely focus on one long-term goal, or at least as few as possible, channeling all your flow states toward it. Think of Olympians. They're extremely goal-directed. Everything in their lives for years revolves around one specific goal. It's what makes them capable of superhuman feats. The second sub-skill of goal-directedness is the ability to identify which actions will directly produce your long-term goal. This is the moment piece of moment-to-decade alignment. You must be able to spot the causal chains, the specific sequences of actions that lead directly to your goal. The third sub-skill of goal-directedness is prioritization itself, deciding which of the goal-directed actions should be done first. When you're highly goal-directed, this becomes easier because you have a clear filter. What moves me closest to my goal faster than anything else? That's what gets done first in the stack, always. The fourth skill is strategic neglect, the discipline to completely ignore everything other than the goal-directed actions that will move you towards your overall goal. All four of these skills only make sense when there's a single long-term goal anchoring them. That's what gives your days direction. That's what lets you build the minute to decade alignment we're talking about here. Now, the question is, how do you maximize your goal directedness? Well, there are 3 steps you can take to dramatically increase your position on the goal-directed spectrum. Firstly, spot the causal chains. Maximizing your goal-directedness starts with the ability to spot causal chains. You need to identify the exact links between what you're doing now and the result you're trying to produce. It's like in the Avengers movie, Endgame. Doctor Strange sits among the ruins of a planet with Iron Man and other Avengers. They're up against Thanos, a warlord, moments away from wiping out half of all life with a snap. So Doctor Strange uses his mystic powers to peer into alternate futures, seeing all possible outcomes. When he opens his eyes, shaken, he explains what he did. Star-Lord asks, "How many outcomes did you see?" 14,605," he responds. Tony Stark leans forward, desperate. "How many did we win?" Doctor Strange pauses, then he replies, "1." Like Doctor Strange, seeing the one winning path among millions, goal-directedness is spotting the exact actions that lead to your goal. Every goal is in effect waiting for its causes. When you're highly goal-directed, your brain stops seeing a pile of disconnected tasks and starts seeing a line of dominoes. You don't just ask what's next, you ask what domino knocks down all the rest. Let's say the outcome you want is E. Most of us don't stop to ask, well, what's A? What's B? What's C? What's D? In stimulus response mode, we just do whatever seems productive based on our circumstance or surroundings, and we kind of hope it maybe leads us to E. But if you don't know what A is, then the first domino in the chain goes untouched. You don't know what to start with. If you don't know what B and C are, you don't know how to sequence your effort. And if you don't know what D is, you don't know how close you are to the goal eventually. So being goal-directed means spotting the sequence in advance, at least to the best degree you can. A, B, C, D, E, with how each leads to the next. You identify which specific actions create the direct path to your goal, then you focus your energy on the exact link in the chain that needs your attention right now. Let's go back to my roommate Alan for a second. The outcome he wanted was $250,000 a year. Say instead of chasing $250,000 a year in vague terms, imagine if he sat down and mapped the actual causal chain, the direct path between where he was and what he needed. Let's say he needed 25 clients paying $10,000 each. To land those, he needed to close 50 sales calls. To generate those calls, he needed 100 qualified leads. And to get those leads, he just needed to run one targeted outbound sequence or referral campaign, something he already had the contacts and time to do. That's the chain in Alan's case, that if he had identified would have allowed him to be more goal-directed, but Alan wasn't following that chain. He was tweaking his website, reorganizing random Notion dashboards, all stuff that sort of seemed positive and productive, all stuff that got him into flow, but none of it directly advanced him toward that critical number he needed to hit. And that's the point. Without seeing the causal chain clearly, you can work hard, get into flow states, stay focused, and still go nowhere. That's how misallocated flow happens. When you're executing perfectly on the wrong link in the chain or another chain entirely, when you don't know which domino to push first, you push whatever's closest, and your focus energy gets wasted on peripheral tasks. Now, one mistake that decreases people's ability to spot causal chains is mixing up 2 distinct categories of tasks: optimization tasks and good enough tasks. Optimization tasks require continual refinement because incremental improvements yield exponentially greater results. They're worth getting from a 9 to a 10 because every small improvement significantly boosts your outcome. For example, a YouTube thumbnail that's a 9 out of a 10 in terms of quality might get 50,000 views, but a thumbnail that's a 10 out of 10 might earn 500,000 or 3 million views. A key sales pitch that's nearly perfect might raise $100,000, while a flawless pitch might raise $1 million. Optimization tasks are clearly goal-directed, but then there are good enough tasks where once you've hit a certain threshold, additional refinement doesn't meaningfully boost results. Going from an 8 to a 10 provides no significant gain. It's a waste of precious cognitive bandwidth and time. Things like administrative tasks like email and scheduling or routine internal reports, just handle them quickly and move on. Further, polishing adds no extra value. When you're low on the goal-directed spectrum, you spend Monday perfecting an internal document format that no one cares about, meticulously adjusting fonts for 90 minutes while ignoring 3 client emails that could generate immediate revenue. When you're high on the goal-directed spectrum, you draft that same document in 10 minutes to a good enough quality and then immediately nail all the client emails that actually move you towards your goal. A missile doesn't optimize its trajectory for beauty, only for impact. That's one way to remember the core principle here. Most tasks don't deserve perfection. Save your obsession for the few things where it actually does matter. The optimization tasks rather than the good enough tasks. To make this distinction easier, remember this: most tasks are not optimization tasks. They're good enough tasks, where getting to 80% quality is enough. Going from 80% to 100% creates very little additional value. Perfection is expensive. You only want to apply perfection where it compounds. Now, how do we actually do this? How do we spot the causal chains and maintain constant, vigilant awareness of our goal-directed actions at all times? Well, that brings us to operationalizing your goal-directedness. Through our research at flowstate.com across thousands of high performers and drawing from cognitive science, we've developed 3 simple systems that can help anyone achieve a high level of goal directedness. Firstly, there's the goal stack, a visual hierarchy that reverse engineers your long-term goal into actionable weekly goals, creating clear lines of sight from what you're doing today to your long-term goals. Secondly, there's the goal flywheel, a weekly planning system that identifies and schedules your most goal-directed actions, preventing goal drift through the week by maintaining focus on true progress rather than busy work. And then there's the power down ritual, a daily 30-minute reset that ensures you're always clear on tomorrow's most important actions while creating closure for today. Here's the simplified implementation of each. Firstly, build your goal stack. Create a 1-page document where you map your vision, where you want to be, to your 5-year goal, then to your 1-year goal, quarterly goals, monthly goals, and finally weekly goals. This becomes your minute to decade alignment map, a direct line connecting your daily actions to your long-term goal. Spin your goal flywheel once weekly, typically Sunday evening, ideally that, or Sunday morning, if you have to, Monday morning, or you could do it on a Friday. You review your goal stack, then you identify the 3 to 5 weekly actions for that coming week that would most directly advance your monthly and quarterly goals. Write these down as your goal-directed actions. For the week, a physical or digital list you can refer to whenever you feel pulled in multiple directions is what you're creating here. Schedule these actions in your calendar before anything else gets added, and then implement a power down ritual. At the end of each workday, spend 30 minutes on 3 phases. First, identify tomorrow's 1 to 3 most goal-directed actions and schedule them with clear, specific micro goals. These are targets for your attention to trigger flow state. Second, clear open loops by making quick decisions on pending items. Finally, mentally disengage from work completely to allow for recovery. This creates the separation needed for sustained peak performance. These 3 systems form the infrastructure that make up goal-directedness and that make it automatic rather than requiring constant willpower. They connect today's actions to tomorrow's outcomes. They move you higher on the goal-directed spectrum, transforming you from being a leaf blown around by the wind into a heat-seeking missile locked onto its target. Without this structure, your brain drifts back into stimulus response mode. You start misallocating your focus and flow. And these systems have low setup barriers. The goal stack takes under 30 minutes to build. The goal flywheel requires just 15 minutes weekly. The power down ritual takes minutes daily, but saves hours of wasted effort. It's almost absurd how much return you get from these minimal investments. The final step in maximizing your goal-directedness is developing the skill of strategic neglect, a concept pioneered by a dear mentor of mine and incredible entrepreneur, Jonathan Cronstead. Strategic neglect is the discipline of choosing what not to do, no matter how useful, attractive, or interesting it seems, because it's less important than the most goal-directed action in any given moment. Strategic neglect means having the discipline to say no to good opportunities so you can say yes to great ones. This isn't about ignoring responsibilities or being careless. It's about recognizing that any time spent on a less goal-directed action than the most goal-directed action is time stolen from a more goal-directed action that would move you further, faster to the goal. Strategic neglect is the final defense against flow misallocation. You remove the temptation to pour your flow states into work that feels good but lacks impact. A heat-seeking missile doesn't waste processing power on every thermal signature it detects. It filters out distractions to maintain lock on its primary target. You skip a weekly meeting because the only thing on the agenda is something you already solved. You leave messages unanswered until the real work is done. You delay reading a book everyone says is a must read because it doesn't solve the problem right in front of you. Once you master strategic neglect, you start to feel lighter, your work sharpens. Now you might push back thinking, but everything seems urgent. Well, the thing is, very few things are mission critical. Usually urgency is a feeling, not a fact. Test it. If you ignore urgent things for 24 hours, will it impact your long-term goals? If not, the urgency may not matter that much. Successful entrepreneurs, they triage like ER doctors. Life-threatening, handle it. Important but not immediate, defer it. Not critical, ignore it. Top performers aren't calmer because they care less. They're calmer because they care so precisely. As you move higher on the goal-directed spectrum, you'll always know what your goal-directed actions are, and you'll get better at ruthlessly eliminating, compressing, ignoring, or delegating everything else. That discussion about branding, that online group that might boost revenue, that random side skill you told yourself you learned this year, everything that isn't the #1 goal-directed action in any given moment is a voluntary decision to impede and delay progress toward your goal, where you are knowingly and explicitly acknowledging that by doing this less goal-directed action, I'm not going to move toward the goal that I know I want at the speed that I otherwise could. It's your missile chasing the wrong heat signature. And sometimes that's okay, but just be clear and honest with yourself that that's what's happening. Now, by the way, if you'd like a straightforward breakdown of how to immediately boost your output through goal-directedness, I put everything we've covered today into a concise guide you can use as a reference point to remember and implement all of this material. You can click the link below. We'll send it to you within seconds. Now, here's a litmus test to see where you are on the goal-directed spectrum. Imagine you're at your desk, deep in your workday. Suddenly, someone you respect walks in. They point at you and they demand, what is the single most goal-directed action you should be doing right now? Could you answer that question instantly with full conviction and clarity, or would you fumble? The truly goal-directed peak performer can answer this question at any moment, at any time, across multiple time intervals, what their most goal-directed action is for the day, for the week, and likely for the month and quarter too. They know exactly what moves them toward their long-term goals. It is the most top-of-mind thing in their mind. Their weekly goal-directed action and their daily clear goals rest at the top of conscious awareness. If you can't answer this question in a few seconds, then your most goal-directed action becomes obvious, which is to pause everything you're doing and figure out what your goal-directed action actually is so you can answer that question in seconds. If you don't know what your most goal-directed action is, you're not operating from high up enough on the goal-directed spectrum. You're a leaf in the wind, stuck in stimulus response mode instead of action outcome mode. On a daily basis, being highly goal-directed means activating all 4 sub-skills of goal-directedness. Reviewing your main goal first thing each morning, identifying the specific clear goals that will move you directly toward that goal, prioritizing those actions before anything else, and ruthlessly protecting your focus by strategically neglecting everything else. When you've moved toward the maximum end of the goal-directed spectrum, this clarity becomes your superpower. Like a missile that ignores decoys and focuses only on its target heat signature, you'll filter out the noise and maintain focus only on what truly matters. You'll eliminate flow misallocation from your work life completely. You'll always know what deserves your focus and where your flow states should be placed. And you'll make progress at a pace that seems impossible to others. And that's why your position on the goal-directed spectrum is one of the clearest predictors of peak performance. Assuming basic talent, skill, and judgment, how dialed in your targeting system is, how accurate and reliable your internal heat seeker is, makes all the difference. Now, dialing up your goal-directedness is only half the battle. In our next video, we cover how to maintain lock, how to keep your missile from drifting by prioritizing correctly and learning to strategically ignore every flare that tries to pull you off target. If you want to learn that, click the video here.